So today we'll see update user attributes in API from API. Okay. So I think the bulk, update user attributes is pending for a long time. So we'll cover that today. Okay. And the OAuth types also a little bit important topic because we are just seeing the front end only. Like if you remember, we have integrated an app. We just entered only the login URL and logout URL and also the base URL while integrating an OpenID Connect app with Okta. But in the back end, it's like many things are happening. Okay, so what are all the different types of flows and which type of flows will be used for which type of applications? Okay, that we will see. So let me. So if you remember, we have seen until that day. So okay, authorization code flow and client credentials code flow, resource owner password flow, authorization code flow with PKCE. The final one is implicit flow, which is not frequently used now because the replacement of this implicit flow is nothing but authorization code flow with PKCE. So mostly we'll cover all these flows in our slides, and you will understand how the user account informations are getting transferred and how the user access informations are being transferred. So I hope you have this terms knowledge also, right? So during our discussion, we have discussed about this authorization resource server, client server and all. So do you want me to refresh it or it's fine?
Yeah, it's fine.
So let's start with this authorization code flow. Okay, so this is a basic flow. So to enable this authorization code flow, as we discussed on that day, we need a web server. Okay, which means an application which we are going to enable SSO with the help of this authorization code flow. That application should be hosted in a web server. Okay. The reason why I'm saying it should have a web server is there should be some space to store the client ID and secret ID. Okay, so if you remember, we have integrated an app with Okta and we got this client ID and secret ID. Okay, two IDs we got, and we need to transfer both the client ID and secret ID to the app application team, so that they can able to configure that client ID secret ID at their end. Okay, we'll see here how that client ID and secret ID will help us to validate the authorization and authentication part. Okay. So here you can see in the top 4 components, which is user. User is nothing but you, or the end user who is trying to access that application, and the regular web app, which is nothing but an application where which application we are going to access. Okay, so it's a web application, and you can see auth tenant. Auth tenant in the sense here you can understand. Make auth tenant in replacement with this Okta. Okay, this is nothing but an Okta tenant. Or if you want to make it in an clear OpenID terms, then it should be authorization server. Okay, Okta authorization server. And your API is nothing but your our API where all our data will be stored. I mean the database where our all our user information and the details are stored. Okay, so that we will see how it is getting integrated. So the first step will be click login link, which means for another thing I'll tell you, another trick actually. So for all the applications that is enabled for OpenID Connect, there is no flow that you can trigger from IDP, which means from Okta. Always the URL or the application access will be initiated only by the application URL. Okay, so that you have to make sure for OAuth applications. For all the OAuth applications, you cannot enable IDP based flow, which means you cannot log into dashboard and you cannot access that application in dashboard, Okta dashboard. Okay, if you're accessing Okta dashboard, then obviously that's an IDP flow. But for OpenID Connect flow applications or OAuth flow applications, there is no IDP based initiated flow. Okay, actually there is a trick. There are some tricks that you can enable SWA for that application to enable that application tile in your Okta dashboard, but it's just only a trick. Okay, it's not like a direct usage that you can make use. Okay, so here you can see once you log in or click that link, okay, the URL, let's say for example an application URL, okay, https:// maybe some application.com, something like that. Okay, once you enter the URL, the request will take you to the application, web application, where to the server basically, where the web application is hosted. Okay, so that way they have merged and they have mentioned just like a regular web app. Okay, now, once the request reaches the application server, the first thing that it will happen is the application will request with Okta for authorization code. Okay, authorization code is nothing but an alphanumeric value. Okay, it's like an randomly generated code. Okay, that code will be requesting by the web app. The web app will request the authorization code detail from the Okta tenant. Okay, authorization server. So it will ask like, can you please share the authorization code to me so that I can validate the authorization code and I can grant user access with the applications. Okay, that is second step. Now, once once the Okta tenant receives that request from application, okay, what Okta tenant or authorization server will do is it will ask the user to perform the authentication and authorization, which is nothing but a user ID and password. Okay, you have to enter the user ID and password. So that's what this third step mentions. Okay, redirect to login/authorization prompt, which means you will be redirected to the browser, which is an Okta. With the Okta console, you need to enter the user ID and passwords. Okay. In the third step, you have entered the user ID and password. Next, the fourth step is authenticate and consent, which means once you enter the user ID and password, okay, the user ID and password will be validated by the user which will be validated at the Okta tenant. Okay, if you see, it's an auth tenant, which is nothing but an Okta tenant. Okay, so once the user ID enter the password and the credentials, it will be validated here at the Okta end. Okay, now the validation has been completed and Okta identified that the user ID and password is correct. Now the request has been completed successfully. The authentication has been successfully completed. Now, once it is authenticated, Okta authorization server will send the authorization code. So if you remember, this authorization code has been requested in the second step, right? In the second step only, the application have requested for the authorization code, which is being generated at the fifth step. Okay, just a sec. So the authorization code has been generated at the fifth step. Okay, the authorization code will be sent to the application now. Okay, if you see regular web app. Okay, so that is fifth step. Once the first step will be requesting for authorization code, then Okta will route the user to enter the user ID and credentials. Once it is entered, it will be validated at the Okta end. Once it is validated at Okta end and the user ID password is correct, then Okta will issue an authorization code to the application. Okay, that's what this fifth step. Once the authorization code has been received, okay, there will be a string will be generated. Okay, string is nothing but an alphanumeric value. Okay, how it is generated? So if you remember, in the second step, the application have requested for authorization code, which has been shared at the fifth step. Okay, which means Okta have sent an authorization code to the application. Now, in the sixth step, the authorization code which we got from Okta, that will be the first component, and the second component will be the client ID. If you remember, we have generated client ID and secret ID shared to the app team where they will store it in their application. Okay, both that value will be merged and it will be converted as a token. Okay, totally three components: authorization code plus client ID plus secret ID. All these three will be merged and converted as a token. Okay, that will be sent back again to the Okta tenant. Okay, if you see, that what happens at sixth step. Okay, now if you remember, Okta have generated this authorization code flow in the fifth authorization code in the fifth step, and Okta knows the client ID and secret ID whenever the application integration happens. So once all these three things are merged from the application and it is being transferred from the application to the Okta will validate all these three whenever that token got it, whenever the Okta received the token from the application. Okay, that's what here it says. 7th step, validate authorization code plus client ID plus client secret. All the three informations will be validated at the Okta tenant itself. Okay, is it clear? Any questions on this?
Yeah.
Okay. So once Okta validates all the three components, okay, because the authorization code has been generated by Okta and it is transferred to the application. Now, application built the three information added together and it will send it to the Okta. Okta will again validate all the three information because authorization is the one that we have generated, Okta have generated. Client ID and secret ID is also generated during the first time itself, okay. So all the three informations will be validated. Once it is validated, if it is success, then an ID token, access token will be issued to the application, end application, okay, by Okta. Which Okta is nothing but an authorization server. Authorization server will issue the ID token and access token. So what is the difference between ID token and access token? So this may be an interview question. You can just make a note if you want. With the help of the ID token, what we can do is we can able to get the identity information from our API, Okta API, okay. With the help of access token, we can able to get the list of access that we have for that application from the Okta API, okay. That is the only difference. If it is ID token, we can able to get only the identity information, for example, first name, last name, what is my login ID, what is my location, so those things, okay. Or the access token will help us to get the access information, what level of access I have, until what the timing level that I have access towards that application. So those informations will be there at the access token, okay. To get that information, access token will be used, okay. So here you can see the 9th step will be, once the ID token, access token has been issued by authorization server, which is nothing but an Okta server, to the application. With the help of that access token, the application can able to validate the user's authorization and user's information, okay, with which is hosted in the API. So if you see, the last one is Okta API. So is it clear, Premada? Any questions on this?
Yeah, this is authorization code flow from Okta to API, right?
Okta to application.
Application, yeah.
Okta to a regular web application.
Okay.
Okay, so that's here, if you see, it is validating the authorization code which is generated by Okta. Okay, that's the reason it has been named as authorization code flow. Okay, and I'll come to this one, authorization code with PKCE, before covering these two, because authorization code with PKCE is more related to authorization code flow. Okay, that is the reason. Yeah, so same thing, user, okay, application here, auth tenant, which is nothing but an Okta tenant, and API, our Okta API. Okay, so we'll see how the data is getting transferred between this. Okay, the first one is user trace.
PKCE means, what is that full form? That
PKCE is nothing but proof key code exchange. PKCE, proof key code exchange. You will understand what is the meaning of this PKCE in this flow.
okay.
Okay, so the first step is the user enters the login URL, okay, and the user will be routed to the application server. Okay, the user will be routed to the application, not the web server. So if you see, it is just mentioned as app because this kind of application doesn't have server. Okay, and if you remember, in the authorization code flow, we discussed that we are sharing the client ID and secret ID, which will be stored at the application end. But in this flow, the client ID and secret ID will not be generated, and it will not be shared to the app team also.
Okay.
So you cannot see this client ID, secret ID in this flow also. We'll see that how it works. Okay. So it is just used for an application which doesn't have any server hosted or any space to save the client ID and secret ID. Okay, such kind of applications only. For example, HTML app or JavaScript app, or maybe you can take some applications which has been built on, for example, mainly the JavaScript applications and browser-based application, which means an application you are generating, and that application will be hosted only at the browser or only at your system. Okay, there is no web server, there is no application server, nothing is there. So such kind of application, you need to go ahead with this flow. Okay, authorization code flow with PKCE. Okay, and if you see, whenever the user access that link, automatically it will route you to the application end. In the application, there will be an option to generate a code. Okay, two things will be generated. First thing is code. It will be like a code. Okay, normal code. It will be like usually normally like the code will be like alpha numeric value. Okay, it doesn't have any alpha numeric, but it will be a combination of alpha and numeric value. Okay, so the code will be generated, and also the code challenge will also be. So what is the difference between code verifier and code challenger? Code verifier is nothing but a process to verify that code which is being generated, and code challenge will be used for challenging that particular code that got generated beginning. Okay, verifier is nothing but an verification process happening, but challenge is happening at the auth tenant, which means an Okta tenant. Okay, so that's the reason. If you see, we are using some code. Okay, and we are verifying it. Okay, that's the reason it has been named as PKCE, which means proof key code exchange. We are generating a code, and the code will be exchanged between applications that will be used as a proof key. Okay, that's the reason they have named as PKCE, proof key code exchange. The code will be generated and it will be exchanged between applications, and that code will be validated as a proof key. Okay, proof for a key basically. That's the reason it has been named as PKCE. Now we'll come back to this flow. Okay, once it reaches an application, application will generate a code verifier and code challenge inside the application itself. Okay, now once it is generated, the authorization code request plus the code verifier and code challenger will be sent to the auth tenant. Okay, so if you remember, whenever we are creating an application with authorization code alone, we got client ID and secret ID. If you create an application just with authorization code with PKCE, you will be getting only authorization code. Okay, sorry, I just got misconceived. Okay, so let me come back from this point. So once the request has been reached the application, it will validate, it will generate a code value, okay, at the application end, and the code value will be added to the authorization code request sent back to the Okta. Okay, that's what the here third step it mentions. Okay, authorization code request, which is just like a request, okay, plus the code challenge, okay, which is getting generated here, okay, will be passed on to the Okta tenant, okay, which means an authorization server. Now Okta will again route us back to the Okta login screen to enter the user ID and credentials. Once the user ID and credentials has been entered by the end user, okay, authentication will take place. Once authentication has been successful, then the authentication consent details will be sent to the app, Okta app again. Okay, in the Okta app again an authorization code will be generated. If you remember in the authorization code flow, okay, first authorization code will be generated just like that. Okay, but here before generating authorization code itself, this code is getting generated. Okay, that is the only difference. Okay, now you got the authorization code generated by Okta, which will be sent back to the application. Now application, what it will do is, if you remember earlier, it sent a message with code challenge and authorization code request. But here again the app will send the authorization code which is received in the before step and the code verifier. Okay, that's the difference you can see. Code verifier, here it is code challenge. Okay, so two types of data will be generated, and that will be the first challenge will be sent from the first step, and during the second step, authorization code plus code verifier will be generated and it will be transferred. Okay, here also again the validation will happen. Okay, whatever the code verifier and the code challenge that came, here is code verifier came, and here code challenge came. Okay, both the code verifier and code challenge has been verified at the Okta end, and once it is verified, it generates an ID token and access token. If it is a genuine one, it will generate the ID token and access token. With the help of that ID token and access token, the request can be initiated to the API to get the informations. Okay, the only difference between authorization code flow and authorization code flow of PKC is in authorization code flow, The client ID and secret ID will be passed on between applications, but here the code verifier and code challenge will be passed on between two applications. Okay, is it clear?
Yeah.
And if you remember, there is no static value, okay, anywhere in this authorization code with PKCE. But if you see in authorization code flow, there will be two static value, which is some client ID and secret ID, because client ID and secret ID will not change at any cost. Okay, once you integrate an app with Okta, the client ID and secret ID will be generated. That will be stable until that application will be decommissioned. Okay, but here in this PKCE mechanism, okay, this PKCE mechanism, each and every time this code verifier and code challenge will be generated, which will be unique for each and every request. That is the main difference. Okay. Is it clear? Shall I go ahead with the third flow? Okay. Now let's start with the client credential flow. Okay, so what is the purpose of this client credential flow and when it will be used? Okay, when we are using client credentials flow. Now let's take an example that your Okta is going to talk with another application, which means there is no human intervention in the middle. For example, if you remember, for client credential and authorization code flow with PKCE flow, sorry, authorization code with authorization code PKCE flow, there will be an human consent will be asked, or human interaction will be there for asking for user ID and password and all, if you remember. But here there will be no human talk at all. Okay, it is just like two applications are authenticating with each other to talk with each other. Okay, that is the purpose of this client credential flow. This type will call it as client credential flow, and they will ask this question. Okay, interview question. There might be a question like this. Okay, let's say I want to integrate two application. Okay, that application wants to talk with each other in a secure way. What is the mechanism that you will use to secure those applications, two applications? Okay, the first and foremost thing you have to use is you have to say like, I'll enable OAuth flow. Okay, for that application, inside that OAuth flow, there is a flow type called client credential flow, which will be used because the client credential flow is the one which will be used for authenticating between two applications or two machines. Okay, without any human intervention. You have to say like that. So that is the main unique feature of this client credential flow. Okay, so I was just saying about this client credential flow. Okay, so a client credential flow will be mainly used for an application to application talking mechanism. Okay, there will be no human intervention in the middle to enter the credentials or to confirm the consent, like that. Okay, if you see in the authorization code flow, there will be a user tab where the request will start from user and it will come to the authentication and consent. Okay, and at the last we'll get the page also. Okay, for that we will be users will be there. But in this client credential flow, it's like talking application itself talking with each other. Okay, so if you see, it's an M2M app, which means application to application communication app, that we will call it. Okay, and there will be no human in the middle to approve or to review. Let's take this scenario. Okay, you have built an automation in your organization. In that automation, each and every day, let's say 1,000 plus requests are being processed. Okay, so all these thousands requests should be genuine one, right? Let's say your automation application is going to talk with Okta. Okay, how Okta will trust that the automation tool is the one which is sending these many thousand applications? How Okta will recognize that? At the same time, whenever Okta sends some data back to the automation application should trust that application, should address that Okta. Okay, then only it will confirm that it is coming from a genuine source. If you leave it like that, okay, any user or anyone who have any of the data, okay, to access the Okta application, he can able to access it without any issue. To avoid that, what they are doing, right, they are doing this authentication between two applications with the help of this client credentials flow. Okay, So here you can see the component, it is M2M app, which is an application, and auth tenant, which is nothing but an Okta, and API. API is nothing but an Okta's API. Okay. So if you see the first one itself, here also it is something related to the authorization code flow. Okay. In the authorization code flow, if you remember, once the application request for authorization code, which will be sent to the Okta. Okta will send back the authorization code to back to application. Okay. Same here. If you see, the client ID and secret ID will be stored at this application end already. What the application will do is the application will send the client ID and secret ID to the auth tenant or Okta tenant. Okay. And the client ID and secret ID alone will be validated here at the Okta, and it will send the access token back to the application. So if you remember in the authorization code flow, initially there is one flow which will be like, there is a request for authorization code will be generated, and the authorization code will be, the request will be reached the application, Okta application. Okta will generate that authorization code flow, authorization code, and send it back to the Okta tenant. From that only it will merge that secret ID, client ID, and all it back to the Okta. But all those steps will be eliminated in this type. Okay, client secret, client credential flow, and in the client credential flow, the first step will itself will be like initiating the client ID and secret ID, sending it to the Okta to validate the client ID and secret ID. If the client ID and secret ID which is sent from the end application is valid, okay, then Okta will validate that, and it will send an access token back to the application, end application. Okay. In the end application, access token will be used for getting the access back from the Okta. Okay, your API, Okta API. So that is the only difference between client credential and authorization code flow credential methods. Okay. Any questions on this?
Yeah, it's fine.
If you are attending any interview for SSOS, first it will be like 30% in SAML application, SAML flow. Okay, how the SAML flow works and how the SAML applications is being integrated, and at least 50% of the question will come from this OAuth flow, OAuth and OpenID flow for sure, because everyone knows it is very boring and it is very complex, but that should, the interviewer needs a reason, right, to reject candidates. So they will take these questions and they will shoot questions like anything. Even if you work in this OAuth or OpenID for more than 5 years, you will not understand everything end to end. It's like, a mystery kind of thing, this OpenID and OAuth. It is very rare people like they know end to end OpenID and OAuth. It's like, only 5 to 10% of the people in the world, I can say. So that much complex it is. So I would suggest you to just better learn this flow. This flow will give you a difference, and you can able to crack an interview easily, because whoever is asking question, they will also know only this flow. They will not know more than this for sure. Okay. So maybe you can take some time also. You can just go through this flows and learn this flow. This is very much important for interview purpose only. But if you're going to integrate an app with Okta, or that you don't need this flow and all, it is very simple. Sure. Let's see the final one, which is resource owner password flow. Okay, so this resource owner password flow, this will be used on very old legacy applications. Okay, which means they don't even have a web server, or they don't even have an application server, okay, to host their application. They will be doing in some complex legacy kind of thing. The final one is resource owner password flow, which is nothing but which will be used for very legacy applications. Okay, mostly this is not a suggested way to enable SSO for an application by using this flow. Why? Because this will be explicitly stores user ID, sorry, it will explicitly stores the service account or some passwords in an application. Okay, so if you break an application, or if you hack, or if you try to inspect an application, automatically you can able to see this user ID and token and all. Okay, sorry, user ID and password and all. So it's not at all an suggestible way to enable this, but if you don't have any other option, you can go ahead and enable this. Okay, it is very simple. So if you see user, app is there. Okay, Okta tenant is there, API is there. Okay, the first thing is user will click the login URL, and they will be routed to the Okta tenant. In that Okta tenant, it will be having the user ID and password. Okay, in the request itself, the user ID and password will be validated at the Okta tenant. Once it is validated, the access token will be issued back to the application. With the help of that access token, you can able to get the data from your API. Simple. Okay, it's not like very complex thing. Only thing is you are entering the user ID and password whenever you are clicking that URL. Once you click that URL, user ID and password will be validated, which will be passed from an application to Okta. In Okta, it will be validated. Once it is validated, the access token will be issued. That's it. It's like very simple flow only. There is no complex thing here. Okay, so is it clear? Any questions on this? Okay.
And what is like Okta identity governance? What means where we are using, and what is that using for like Okta identity governance?
Actually, Okta identity governance, it's just like a new tool. Okay, if you see workflows, right? Workflow is an external tool. Okay, that they have integrated with Okta for using purpose. Okay, same thing for Access Gateway. Access Gateway is an external tool which will be integrated with Okta. I mean, not external tool. It has been identified by Okta. Okay, same thing. They are introducing this identity governance tool, which is published in market recently. Okay, it's a new tool actually. Yeah, so here you can see, right, it is mainly used for access governance. So do you know what is access governance?
What?
Access governance.
Yeah, actually I opened this one, so I just able to see like 3 workflows. Means that is like automations, like
Yeah.
that one day I think we discuss like workflows once we give the details.
Yeah.
So initially we do just give that some flow, so that if any joiners, it will be automatically works that workflows. I just have some little bit idea, but this lifecycle management and access governance, I'm really not. It is like
Okay. See, identity lifecycle management is nothing but what we did, right? If you remember, we have configured some rules and all. Okay. So with the help of that rule, whenever the user account is getting created in Okta, automatically they will be added to some default applications. Okay, and it is a one step of lifecycle management. Okay, of an account. For example, if you want to perform the same thing, whenever the user leaving the organization, you want to make some changes for that account. Okay, automatically. So all these steps, or for example, if the user is getting migrated from one location to another location, or he is being promoted from a senior level person to manager level person. Okay, for example, if it is a senior level person, you can have access for all the technical stuffs, which means an Okta admin console, code repository for those things. But if you are a manager, you should be having a position just to manage the team, not like writing a code. Right? It's like a person who is writing a code or implementing some applications. No, we should not do it. So Okta will automatically analyze these things. For example, if a user is promoted from senior to manager, automatically that unique restrictions will be applied for that application, for that user basically. Okay, so this is also a part of identity lifecycle management. So I think they are building a separate tool for such kind of scenarios. Okay, and another thing I'll tell you, what is this access governance. For example, this time you are joining an organization. Okay, you joined an organization as an Okta admin, L2 admin. Let's say you are joining as an Okta L2 admin. Okay, so you got some level of access in Okta, and you got some access to some servers also. Okay, all the Okta related stuffs you got access now. Now let's say, for example, after 2 years or 3 years, okay, you moved from Okta team to, let's say, Workday team. Okay, you moved from Okta team to Workday team. Now we have to make sure that all your Okta related access should be blocked, or it should be removed, or it should be terminated. Okay, all the access related to your Okta should be blocked. Okay, how that we can make sure that all your access are removed properly. Okay, that we can do with the help of the access governance. Okay, what it will happen in the backend is on a periodic manner. Let's say, for example, monthly once or 3-month once. Okay, all your access will be validated, or the access or the people who have access to the Okta solutions, the Okta servers, Okta admin console, those people's access will be validated either by your manager or the product owner. Okay, for your organization, they will be validating whether you are an eligible person to have or part of this team access or not. Okay, if you are not eligible, your access will be restricted that time itself. Okay, if you are eligible, then you can go ahead and continue with the same position. But if you are moving from your from Okta team to Workday team, then you should not have access in your Okta details, right? So all your Okta related documents, access, server access, everything should be blocked. How we are making sure that it is blocked appropriately. For example, today you are moving from one team to another team. By today itself, your access for Okta should be blocked. Okay, if not, then what you will do is you may go to Workday team. Okay, you will work something in our Workday for a few days. Later on, you will update something in Okta without reaching Okta team. If you got access, you can able to go ahead and do it. Okay, it should not happen. That's the reason they are bringing this access governance, which means they will governance this access on a periodic manner. For that, we need a tool which Okta is generating right now, actually. I mean,
Okay, that means for access governance also there is a separate tool for cross check of the based on the job title or whatever it will be. Based on that, it will be changing the permissions in access.
Yeah, they are saying all the products will be included in one product, which is an identity governance. All these three, workflow, lifecycle management, and access governance, will be merged, and they will be introducing this as an Okta identity governance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Workflows means that is the flow when is only for the new joiners, or what is that like? No workflow exactly, because access governance, it's already validating the access of employees, right? The lifecycle management means automatically onboarding and offboarding the accounts, giving the permissions access. It will be already is there in the lifecycle management.
Yeah, actually, workflow, it will be used just to reduce our work. That's it. Okay, it's not like, it will not act as any unique as like access governance or identity lifecycle management. Identity lifecycle management, what it will do, it will play a role of migrating a user profile from one role to another role. Access governance, it will play a role for validating the user access on a periodic manner. But this workflow, it will help the users or the admins to do these actions, whatever I said for lifecycle management or access governance, in an easy way. Okay, that will be the tool used for workflow, used by workflow. Actually, it's just like a tool used for doing two actions, both the actions.
Okay. The workflows exactly for we need to create a workflows to that means if any new joiner joining, so for that account creations, even for that automatic accounts, even the creations also, right, in that.
Okay, maybe I can tell you the scenario. Okay, let's say, for example, I said the first scenario, right? If the user account, if an account is moving from one role to another, okay, which means uh, senior role to manager, okay, how that will be identified? Because HR will be the one who will promote you, okay, which means it will be updated only at the HR system, and that will be updated at Okta also automatically. But how you will identify that as an Okta admin? How you will identify that? What you will do is you will create a workflow saying that if the user title attribute is getting updated from senior to manager, okay, then you will define a query, then you will define a flow like, if the user account is getting upgraded from senior to manager, okay, add these groups, remove these groups, or add this application access, remove these application access, notify a message in Slack saying that.
In that case, these three are like interlinked with each other. That means
correct.
access governance based on the workflows, how this, if any promotions to one employee is like one position to another position, the based on the workflows, the access governance can change that rules to that user.
Yes, correct.
Right?
Yeah, correct.
Okay, so these three are like together, they are working, not like
No. It's not like, you can do only this individual life cycle alone. No, for performing life cycle, you need workflow. For performing access governance, you also need workflow.
Okay, these are like an interlinking with each other of
Yeah.
this identity governance. Means these three combined together work as the life cycle management and access governance. Okay.
Yes.